Good morning. When I started medical school, I had already been a nurse, as many of you know, for 14 years. A clinical nurse, always around patients. And actually, I loved it. So when I came to Stanford, within the first week of medical school, I went to the dean of the school and asked him if I could spend some clinical time. Most first-year students would do that just by interviewing patients, a very small part of the first year, but you would get to interview patients to learn how to take a history, which was important, of course. And I said, I just feel like I need to be with patients. I'll volunteer. I could be an aide. I could even just work as a nurse a little bit. So they allowed it. I'm convinced now that they allowed it just because there were a lot of lessons for me to learn there. And the biggest lesson actually came the very first day that I went into the emergency room, which is where he told me I could go. And I've mentioned this story before, so some of you may remember it. I was watching the way many of the physicians were approaching patients. And I remember twice in particular, physicians just walking into the room, not introducing themselves, not taking a moment to help the person be less frightened, but literally walking in, pulling up a gown, putting their hands on somebody's belly, just starting to examine them without any introduction. Something else very similar happened. And in my mind, what was going on is, that's awful. That is, who would do that to somebody? Who would just, not this person's in the, you can hear, I don't need to do the whole story. I don't want to go back there. But within a few minutes, the thought came to me, and this is why I said they allowed it, because there were lessons for me to learn, important lessons. How do you think you'll be able to help heal anyone if that's where your mind is? If you're busy judging somebody, I was saying to myself, how could you possibly, in that moment, allow healing energy to flow through you? So your job here, meaning throughout medical school and training, really throughout life, will be to love everybody, to try and help heal everybody, not just that soul that's there, that's the designated patient, but everybody, no matter what's going on. Now, what's tricky about a moment like that is that it was such a reasonable thought. And of course, therein lies the danger. It was so reasonable to see what was wrong. And so I could have stayed there, but I always felt, you can see, this is a lot of years later. I was 32, so 44 years later, I remember it very clearly, because it was a time for me to say, you can't live in both places at the same time. You're either feeling and relating to God's love in everyone, or you're blocking it. This reading today, which is it's very subtle, this reading, and like all of them, so many strings that we could pick it up by. But two clear messages that come through it are that the need, the desire, if we are in fact wanting to feel that oneness with everyone, if we are sincere on a spiritual path, then we need to make the effort to see everybody as a manifestation of God and to see that everything is perfect exactly as it is. And Swamiji says this very clearly, but that things do not need to be different for us to be able to grow spiritually. All that needs to happen, which is not so easy, is that we need to change our consciousness. Nothing needs to change out there. I just recently went through an experience in my own life that I'll just share in hopes that it might trigger something for some of you. There was a situation in my life that had been troubling to me for a very long time, years and years. And for all of those years, I was sincerely trying to fix it. That's what I was doing. I was trying to analyze what was going on, to shift my position or my views so that energy could flow more easily. I was trying to be nice to everybody that was involved. I was really trying hard to help them see what a good person I was. It never worked. Nothing shifted, nothing changed. I was sincere. I was doing that. All of that was reasonable. And then during this past Easter week, because I, along with a group of people, had put so much energy and effort into writing and manifesting a new program for Easter. So it meant really diving deep and getting as close to Jesus' energy as I could. It was a really sincere endeavor over weeks. And many things came to me. It was a life-changing, transformational experience for me. But what I saw so clearly is, first of all, I felt my love, but a divine love, not a personal love, for everyone involved. But I saw with great clarity for the first time that I didn't need to change anything except how I was being in the midst of it, except my consciousness. Nothing that was happening was wrong. I didn't need anybody involved to be any different than exactly who they were. But if I could see the thread of divine energy that connected us all, then I could feel that love for them. And it wasn't a personal love, and it never needed to be, and it probably never will be. It's better. It's a divine love. It's exactly what Swamiji was talking about. I feel that through the way that Christ loved everyone, because as I said, I think in that sermon, even Judas, who had betrayed him so obviously, so we would say again, how reasonable that he could be angry, or, really seriously angry, because Judas set him up for what was going to happen. But it's not what happened. When Judas approached him to hug him, to let the Romans see, this is the man, you watch who I hug, he said. Jesus greeted him, hello, friend, with pure divine love. It was not what was going on externally. It's what was happening inside of him. But because things are so reasonable in a worldly way, it's so difficult to keep straight about it. There's thousands of examples that just were running through my head last night. To say, that was reasonable, even in the way that I get to have the opportunity to speak with so many people about the issues in their life, I see how they would be making choices that look loving and reasonable or effortful, and yet when it's so personal and interpersonal at that level, it's very hard to move beyond it, to help it expand that situation into all that it can be, which is divine meeting the divine. What came to me as I was reading this was the beautiful way that Swami Kriyananda, who founded Ananda, speaks about in one of the chapters in his Raja Yoga book. He has 3 chapters that he dedicates to Patanjali, who was known as the father of yoga thousands of years ago, before Krishna, before Christ, before Yogananda. He wrote the Eightfold Path, we call it, of yoga, his Yoga Sutras and the Eightfold Path, which are what he said everybody, no matter what religion you are, religion didn't matter, if you were sincerely seeking to find that oneness that's being talked about in this reading today, you would have to perfect everything that he was teaching, because he was teaching from such a high place, saying to us, this is what it looks like when we find ourselves living, knowing beyond a doubt it has nothing to do with the mind, that we're all one, that we're all interconnected. I've said it many times before, the mind can't grasp that. But one part of the Eightfold Path are called the yamas. There's the yamas and the niyamas. The yamas are, this is what you do not want to do. And the niyamas are, do more of this. So if we are looking to be one with God, what we call here self-realized, because Yogananda brought this path to us that is called self-realization, realizing the divine, not just within us, but the divine everywhere. That's what our path teaches us. So Patanjali wrote these yamas that are the don't do: non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, non-greed, non-sensuality. There's 5 of them. And he said, if you can do these perfectly, so I'll just speak for a moment to non-violence. And as I was speaking before about the subtlety of it, it's not just the way we see violence, and it's not don't kill anyone. That is part of nonviolence. We don't want to kill anyone. Probably nobody in this room would do that. Probably you haven't done it in this lifetime. But Patanjali is saying that's not it. It's about the attitude of the mind. The attitude of the mind is what allows us to make sure that all of our deeds, everything we do in the world, is perfectly aligned with our original intention. Again, the intention being to find our way to self-realization. When all of that is aligned, as Patanjali shows us just in one small teaching, nonviolence, so we're not going to kill anybody. We're also not going to be critical in our mind of a person. We're not going to be judgmental of them. We're not going to get in their way of them achieving the highest goal. We're not going to undermine their progress. I could go on. This is all non-violence. So when we stop and we think, how many times do we have a critical thought or a judgmental thought? Or do we have a behavior? Maybe we're not even yet consciously aware of it, but that gets in the way, because he said it's not just overt acts. I don't have the reading in front of me, but Jesus said it, Patanjali saying it. If you feel angry with somebody, and then he goes on, not just angry, but if you undermine their spiritual progress in whatever the words were, those are acts of violence. And he ends with, if you undermine their ability to get to God more quickly, I wish I had it here, but you will suffer with that karmically in great ways. So, and Patanjali goes on to say, if we perfect nonviolence, absolutely perfected within ourselves, we could come face to face with a lion and there won't be any violence there because we are not carrying it in our consciousness. Now that's the essence of what this reading is, intention versus deeds, or deeds versus intentions. It's not versus, it's aligning them so that they are these, our deeds are always aligned perfectly with God's consciousness. That's what we're trying to do. That's exactly what Swami Kriyananda did in creating Ananda. So we have a perfect living example. He built schools, communities, retreats. He wrote music. Everything that he did, never once sacrificing a spiritual principle. Never once. He never put money first. He never would allow. This is why he said people are more important than things. He never even put the success of a venture, whatever the venture was, ahead of the highest spiritual principle. Swami used to say to us that his litmus test for how to behave in the world was if something took away or interrupted his inner peace, he knew he had to stop with it. And just literally as I was sitting here and listening to the song that was being sung, which was so beautiful, and trying to hear those words for the first time, beautiful words. I don't think I've ever really heard the song before. But what Swamiji meant by that came to me. Swamiji saying, if anything, if I feel uneasy about anything, it means that some spiritual principle, the highest spiritual principle, God's consciousness, which we are trying to attune ourselves to, something's off. And it's what happens to all of us. We forget that, so we misbehave. We're trying to search for something. When we're not centered, we typically don't find it. So we go out with our anxious energy looking for it. We look for power, we look for money, we look for it in worldly ways. And then we keep saying, this isn't it. This doesn't make me happy. No, this doesn't make me happy. I did all of that and I'm still not happy. What's missing? What's giving me this feeling of my inner peace being disturbed? I'm not. My intention and my deeds are not aligned. Will every act that I perform, every thought that I have, every gesture that I make, does it align itself with some spiritual principle? And if not, then how can I get it in line? How can I make that happen. There's a wonderful story that I'd like to share. Some of us have heard it many times, but it's just so, it's such a perfect example of what we're talking about here today. There was a man, I don't know if this is a true story or not, but in essence, it's true. A man who used to kill birds and then sell them at the market to make a living. And it's reasonable. He had a business, so it was reasonable. But you could feel how much violence was in that. But as he killed the birds and he would be taking them to market, he always had to walk by this river. And sitting at the river was a sadhu, just praying. He had his beads, he was doing japa. And after a while, the man who was killing the birds noticed that all of the birds loved to come and sit by this man. So he said to himself, I can do that. I can sit by the river. I can do japa. That's easier than what I'm doing. The birds will come to me instead of me having to look for the birds. And so he started to do it. And sure enough, after a time of sitting by the river, of doing the japa, of praying, of being in silence, of attuning himself to the presence of God, the birds started to come to him. That was the first thing that happened. But the second thing that happened is he didn't want to kill the birds anymore. He couldn't kill the birds. When we begin to behave, and it's just moment by moment, he went from killing them to just sitting still. We won't figure it out in our minds. We won't. It will always look reasonable what we're doing. But if we practice aligning intention and deed, intention, the only intention, again, is to know and love God and to see the truth that God is everywhere. Soon, very quickly actually, most of us have seen progress in this very lifetime, that we begin to live from that consciousness. We begin to follow the example of Swami Kriyananda. Once again, I was so moved by, and every one of us, even if you didn't meet Swamiji, doesn't matter. His energy's here. He's with us. We can still feel the beauty, the vibration of everything he did, everything. And for those of us who were near him for any period of time, anyone would attest to the fact that he never sacrificed a spiritual principle. He wouldn't. Now, what does that mean in our lives? It means I couldn't think bad thoughts about the other doctors. It means that in a situation that spanned many, many years of my life, with me desperately trying to make it right by doing all good things, but the intention, I wasn't holding or realizing that the true intention was not to change people, was not to have anybody need to see who I am, and honor that, though from the egoic point of view, it feels reasonable. We'd all like to be seen. We'd all like to be treated well. That's how we move. That's not a bad thing. This is how subtle it becomes. It's just not necessarily obvious. So we can't get there from here. We have to be thinking always, behaving, asking ourselves, what is the highest principle? How can I get there? I'd like to read one thing to you, and then I'm going to ask James to put a comic up on the wall here that summarizes the whole reading and the whole point that I'm trying to share. Jesus said, to know God, we must abandon the last vestiges of ego consciousness. Whosoever shall seek to save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life shall save it and live. The eternal life promised to mankind in the scriptures is that of eternal joy in God. Has nothing to do. Jesus said to us, if you will give up your life, meaning your attachment to everything that is worldly, you'll find your true life, which is your connection to the divine, to God. This divine life he cannot have, he means us, so long as he clings to his little ego, like Swamiji wrote this, like a man, Yogananda, drowning, trying to grab onto a straw. We always need to be asking ourselves, what's the highest way that I could behave? Catch ourselves when negativity and egoic thoughts come to mind. And it's difficult, but here is the way. I'm going to read this to you because it might not be readable. Perhaps some of you saw it. So this is a comic, and there are these two beings. I don't know what they are, beautiful souls. And the first one says, why so optimistic about 2024? What do you think it will bring? Everything seems so messed up. And the littler one says, who's working in dirt there, obviously, I think it will bring flowers. And the first one says, yes? How come? And the little one says, because I'm planting flowers. You see how we behave, what we put out, that perfect deed aligns with the intention. If we plant flowers, we get flowers. I loved this when I saw it. Yeah, Dave Archie put it out for many of us. And I said to myself, this was just a week or two ago, put it aside, this is going to come in handy someday. And here it was. So, yeah, let's all make sure that that which we do in the world manifests our true highest self. This one last point I'd like to make. Everything Patanjali said, everything, many of you know it, they're not rules for us. They're not really rules. They're reflections. Always, this is what I wanted to say about the nonviolence and the ability to befriend a lion if you perfect it. And that was just one, but everything Patanjali ever said, he said because they're reflections of our very highest self. And they are, in fact, in perfect alignment with God's consciousness then. That's our goal.
Thy joy fill our days, O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. The time has come for us to see that there's but one reality upon the earth and high above, a truth that all was made from love, a love that calls to us to fly above the hills, above the skies, above the storms, above where peace and laughter reign. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Guide all our hopes and all our dreams, past every glow that only seems, into the light, the inner sun, into the truth that we're all one. Help us to find in every hour, in every thought, in every flower, a joy that spans eternity, a truth that makes us ever free. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Dearest, when I think of thee, heaven opens and I see shafts of light upon the earth. All then seems of noble birth. Shafts of light upon the earth. All then seems of noble birth. Kindness then appears divine, human error then benign. Goodness rules the universe, men a higher love rehearse. Goodness rules the universe, men a higher love rehearse. Thoughts of you my heart please assure, calm my heart and make it pure. Even so your actions scream, all in life that's base or mean. Even so your actions scream, all in life that's base or mean. Dearest, when I think of thee, heaven opens and I see shafts of light upon the earth. All then seems of noble birth. Shafts of light upon the